How long did your trip feel? 4 or 5 months?
It was like a minute. I went to Subway.
The eatery? What happened?
I ordered.
Did you get the answer you were looking for?
No, I ordered a sandwich at Subway.
The toad is mysterious.
But that frog ripped me off. Little asshole, little fucker.
Friendship is a black comedy film written and directed by Andrew DeYoung and stars Paul Rudd and Tim Robinson. Robinson plays Craig, a narcissistic marketing executive and suburbanite who finds himself infatuated with his suave and interesting neighbor, a weatherman named Austin. I think the best way to describe this movie is if you dropped a character from Tim Robinson's Netflix show, I Think You Should Leave, into what would normally be a romantic comedy about an emotionally unavailable, self-centered man being left by his wife, only to rediscover his passion for his relationship and find a new zest for life with the help of his cool new friend. But instead of following the script, this character gets distracted by how cool his new friend is and loses sight of everything else until his life is in shambles. Unsurprisingly, the movie also has some interesting things to say about, well, friendship. Specifically male friendships, and how hard they can be to navigate and grow into healthy relationships. So real quick for context, I'm going to talk about the movie, and then we'll get into what I feel are some of the messages we can glean from it. Austin and Craig's friendship starts off well enough. The two first meet after a package meant for Austin is delivered to Craig and his wife Tammy's house. When Craig drops it off, Austin invites him over later in the evening for a beer. Craig doesn't want to go. He wants to go see the new Marvel with Tammy and his son Steven, but Tammy convinces him to go so she can hang out with her friend slash ex-boyfriend Devin. Craig is awkward at first, mostly because he's just an awkward person, but as he gets to know Austin, he becomes completely enamored with him. He's a weatherman, he's in a band, he collects artifacts, he forges for mushrooms, he doesn't have a cell phone, he likes to explore the sewers and find hidden entrances into buildings. This exciting new friendship gives Craig a new lease on life, so much that he begins imitating Austin, and the people in his life respond well to this new light that he seemed to have found. Tammy and Steven seem to actually enjoy being around him, and he begins to bond more with his coworkers. The friendship isn't completely one-sided at first either. It's Craig, after all, that prompts Austin to find the courage to ask to be promoted from late-night weatherman to the day shift, a promotion that he ends up getting. After a couple of hangout sessions, Austin asks Craig if he wants to come over to his house for a small party with some of his other friends. Things start out a little rocky, but Craig seems to find his footing and slowly earns a spot of new guy. After a conversation with one of the guys on Austin's back porch, he stays outside just for a moment longer to hype himself up, and then this happens.
You're smart. You have a good job. There's nothing to be nervous about. Just be yourself. You're a freaking prince.
You hit that hard.
Can I use your restroom really fast? So how'd y'all meet?
Now here's the thing, I think a lot of people think that this is the beginning of Craig's downfall, but I disagree. He recovers pretty well from what would normally be an insanely uncomfortable party foul, and while things would probably be kind of uncomfortable, we later learn that he fully intended on paying for the damage like any reasonable person would. No, Craig's downfall begins in the following scene, when the guys are all hanging out in the garage and decide to start sparring with boxing gear. After getting jabbed one too many times by Austin, Craig loses his cool and sucker punches him directly in the face, prompting a heated argument. In an attempt to defuse the situation, just as he did earlier in the evening with the glass door, Craig scrambles to think of something and decides to shove an entire bar of soap in his mouth as punishment.
I'm sorry. What did I do? What did I do?
Which of course just makes everyone more freaked out by him. After numerous attempts to reach Austin, Craig visits him at work and distracts him while he's on air, which causes him to get chewed out by one of the desk anchors. Austin tells Craig to leave shortly before pulling out his cell phone, which confuses Craig because he'd previously bragged about not having one. Later in the day, Craig receives a delivery for a drum set that he ordered specifically for jamming with Austin. Craig loads it into a wagon and drags it over to Austin's for their first jam, only for Austin to initiate a painful friend breakup. This is devastating to Craig, and in a desperate attempt to become the Austin of his own life, he goes from imitating Austin's general vibe to trying to be him entirely. He invites some coworkers over to his house to party, only to sit uncomfortably in his cramped garage. Craig tries to make them think he's cool by showing them a 17th century rusty dagger that looks like a cheap letter opener, and then he attempts to play the drums only to find out that he cannot play them since he's never played them before in his life. The hangout comes to a head when Craig's coworkers almost spoil the new Marvel for him, even though Craig clearly told them that the garage was a spoiler-free zone. That one's kind of on them, honestly. He said those were the rules. After failing to capture the interest of his coworkers, Craig tries to impress his son Steven by taking him foraging for mushrooms, just as Austin did with him. But the mushrooms Craig picks are poisonous and make him incredibly sick, and he throws up in a styrofoam cup while he and Steven are at the mall. After failing to gain the praise of his coworkers and Steven, Craig comes home to another package addressed to Austin, and naturally, he ends up breaking into his house and stealing a gold-plated Desert Eagle from the desk in his office. After feeling rejected by everyone else in his life, Craig tries to impress Tammy by taking her to the same sewer tunnel that Austin took him to. Tammy obviously doesn't want to go into the sewer, but Craig insists, and after he lashes out at her while they're deep in the tunnels, she disappears. Craig screams her name and runs through the tunnels, and then the scene just ends. It cuts to black. The next scene begins with Craig walking through the front door of his house. There's no panic. There's no urgency. He seemingly gave up the search for his wife incredibly easy. Then there's a knock at the door from the police, and you're thinking, oh, okay, good. At least he did that. But they're actually here because Austin called the police about a break-in, and the tracking dogs followed the scent to his house. The police ask Craig where his wife is, to which he calmly responds that she's in the sewer, which of course launches an investigation, where Craig tells the police that Austin was the one who showed him where the access tunnel was, and both of them are put in a holding cell at the station until everything gets sorted out and Tammy is found. Craig and Austin get into a fight in the cell, which causes Austin to fall and reveal that he wears a hairpiece, a fact that he makes Craig swear to never share with anyone. The police eventually find Tammy in the sewer, and her friends and family, sans Craig, throw her a party to welcome her home that celebrates that she's alive.
I look at your wife and I say, oh my God, I would love to just even be a non-sexual partner with her. And I would never say, hey, come into a sewer so I can fucking kill you.
I didn't try and kill her in the sewer. It was an adventure.
You should be dead! Fuck you, you psycho! Who are you?
Afterward, Tammy announces to Craig that she's leaving him to live in her friend/ex-boyfriend Devin's pool house. With nowhere left to turn, Craig visits a clerk at the cell phone store to buy drugs, and ultimately decides to go on a toad venom-induced psychedelic trip, where he visits a Subway where Austin is the clerk and orders a sandwich. Despite claiming the toad ripped him off, this trip does seem to have a calming effect on Craig. He finds a new job and eventually is able to patch things up with Tammy and Steven, at least to the degree that they can have dinner together for Steven's birthday. He even buys Tammy a van for her flower business, and she doesn't immediately reject the idea of her and Steven going into his house to watch a movie and have some birthday cake. However, after Craig leaves the house to get candles for the cake, he sees that there are people over at Austin's and can't resist the urge to invite himself over and hold everyone up with the gold-plated Desert Eagle. Craig makes everyone get down on the floor, but when that happens, Austin's hairpiece falls off. Still somehow delusional enough to think that there's a friendship here anymore, Craig covers Austin while he puts his hair back on by yelling at everybody else and pointing the gun around. Then the police arrive, arrest Craig, and that's basically the movie. Now, don't get me wrong, Craig is, for all intents and purposes, the villain of this story, and everything that happens to him is justified. He's disinterested in Tammy's flower business, and he invalidates her fears as a cancer survivor. He's emotionally neglectful of her and Steven, and he's completely incapable of reading a room or taking social cues, and makes no effort to rectify or understand them. And he's quick-tempered and unstable. However, I think that there's an interesting core to the absurdity that surrounds the movie's events about male friendship, and how we often don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable with our friends the way women do, which can in turn result in weaker, less intimate friendships and results in us being more emotionally stunted. Yes, Craig is an obsessive weirdo, But I think a lot of men can relate to being in a situation with new friends or a group of new friends and feeling anxiety to varying degrees about getting absolutely flamed for saying or doing the wrong thing. And granted, if you constantly feel that way around your friends, you should definitely find new friends. But it isn't always that simple. Men have been socially conditioned to not express any kind of emotion or sensitivity lest they risk being seen as weaker by their peers. In the paper Male Friendship and Intimacy, written by Robert Strickwerda and Larry May, they note the following. In order to have strongly positive emotional feelings for another person, as well as sustained mutual self-disclosure, it is important to be able both to have such feelings and express them. To express such feelings, one must be able to trust another person. Yet sociological studies indicate that the dominant model is one of competition rather than trust between men. Competition creates bonds with teammates, but also makes men reluctant to reveal things about themselves that would make themselves vulnerable and hence cause them to risk being taken advantage of. While I personally feel that as I've gotten older, I've been able to find male friends who don't fit this mold, I can imagine that with younger and more impressionable boys and men, especially those who find themselves gravitating towards Andrew Tate and other manosphere and red-pilled influencers, this problem is only getting worse. And that's on top of the toxic and detrimental ideas that they're also receiving about women, dating, and romantic intimacy. If these young men don't have an emotional outlet when it comes to their friends or their romantic partners, this emotional suppression often bubbles to the surface in terrible, violent ways, be it towards themselves or to others. One can try to argue that men don't crave the same emotional intimacy that women do, but once again, I feel like that's a social construct that we force ourselves to adhere to. Psychologist Niobe Way writes the following in her article, Boys as Human. A central dilemma for boys growing up in the United States is how to get the intimacy they want while still maintaining their manliness. Boys want to be able to freely express their emotions, including their feelings of vulnerability. They want others to be sensitive to their feelings without being teased or harassed or having such desires. They want genuine friendships in which they are free to be themselves rather than conform to rigid masculine stereotypes. And anecdotally, from personal experience, I can attest to that. Growing up and as an adult, I more often seek and sought out these friendships where I was more free to be myself instead of needing to arbitrarily adhere to strict gender guidelines that dictated what my appropriate behavior looked like. However, I also acknowledge that the people who raised me and influenced me were also open-minded enough to allow for that sort of thing. And I realize that a lot of young men, unfortunately, don't have that opportunity. Now, am I going to sit here and try to analyze Craig and excuse his actions? Of course not. Like I said, the guy's a weirdo. But I think that just like how Tim Robinson's sketches in I Think You Should Leave frequently take what would be an imaginary worst case scenario in any given situation and dial it up to 11, so too does the plot of Friendship. Craig's self-esteem is so low that the second he develops a new friendship with someone he sees as cooler than him, he makes every effort possible to emulate them to a pathetic degree. And once that friendship is taken away, he doesn't know what to do with himself. In his own words, Austin makes him feel too free, and he insists that there needs to be rules for how quickly one can be accepted and then have their back turned on them. And while his actions were definitely enough to make anyone feel weirded out and uncomfortable, there's a nugget of truth to this. I've seen groups of men turn on one guy in the group for showing just a little bit too much of what is considered a feminine emotion or interest or even a gesture that was made absent-mindedly. It's like in The Sopranos when all the captains turn on Johnny Sack after he cried because the feds arrested him and took him away from his daughter's wedding. To all the guys out there, I'm not saying that you have to become the kind of friend that feels like a therapist for your friends, nor should you feel obligated to keep around emotionally unstable friends that drain you and actively make your life worse in the name of trying to be a good friend. All I'm saying is that we as humans have a desire for deeper connections with other humans. And while friendships at the superficial level through mutual interests and activities are more than fine, you should have just a couple of friends where you have a mutual trust to share things with and have the knowledge that it won't cause you to be seen as lesser than in their eyes. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching my video. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and check out some of my other stuff. I work really hard on all my videos and I'm trying to get a more frequent upload schedule going. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go check out that new Marvel because I heard it was supposed to be nuts. I know a guy who went and saw it, he literally went fucking crazy.